we were discussing yesterday the multinationals, and then we moved on to the international trade. And then we discussed the potential risks from international trade and the trade barriers as well. We moved on to the free trade. Free trade and globalization, where the free trade, where there is no trade barriers or very minimal trade barriers, then that is termed as free trade. Because of the increased import and export amongst the countries, more and more countries are inclined towards the free trade. But on the other side, there is a regime of protectionism. What is happening in protectionism, where the economy is being protected by a country? How? They are protecting the domestic industry, because they know their domestic industry is not as competitive as the other industries of the countries. So they are in the regime of protectionism. One side, there is free trade, and the other side is the protectionism. Okay, so what are the benefits of free trade? So it offers much wider choices of goods and services while you are importing the things. And import of raw materials can allow a developing economy to increase its rate of industrialization. And then importing also increase the competition in the domestic industry. And due to this increased competition, there will be more variety and less price. And moreover, they will try to keep up the quality of the products and services as par to the other countries. And yesterday we also saw that in the free trade, the countries begin to specialize in different products in which they are best in making those things. And I gave the example of France, which is best in producing the fragrances and the perfumes. So the other countries, they believe in importing the fragrances and the perfumes from France instead of producing themselves. And thus, this specialization will lead to economies of scale as well. Now, the changes in the global economy and the pattern of international trade. What is happening here? There are emerging trade blocs, the regional trade blocs. The very good examples of these regional trade blocs are the NAFTA. You must be knowing the NAFTA is the North American Free Trade Area. And the second is, which is of our region, is the ASEAN, which is Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Why these trade blocs are being made? Because to reduce the trade barriers, to increase the trade amongst these trading blocs. And very much active and the most lucrative trade bloc is the European Union. You all know the European Union, where all these have combined together, and they are trading a lot amongst them. Another trade bloc is the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Group. Now, in some countries, there has been a decline in the manufactured goods in the recent years. What are those countries? Like the developed economies, in which there is USA, UK, even Germany. Why? Because they are now moving to the service sector. There has been an increase in the commercial and financial services in these developed economies. Means they are facing the deindustrialization and they are moving to increase the financial services and the commercial services. So there is a change in the recent years. So globalization, as we said, the increasing freedom of movement of goods, capital and people around the world. And the most involved organization for the globalization is the WTO. What is WTO? It's the World Trade Organization. That organization, Pakistan is also one of the member of this WTO, and this organization is basically into the free trade areas. They want to reduce the trade barriers as much as possible. But on the other side, the other economies, they are also into protecting their own industry. Therefore, there is a mix. Some nations are into reducing the trade barriers, while others are protecting their own industry so that the impact on their economy is not as bad. But again, globalization is an important thing, and all the nations are moving into globalization. So after doing globalization and free trade, we move on to the privatization. I hope all people know what is privatization. It is selling the state-owned enterprises and the business organization to the private people, which is privatization. Now, impact. What is the impact of change, of this change from public to private sector? And which industries are being privatized? In most of the cases, if you see in the whole world, the organizations or the state-owned entities which are a loss-making entity, that is privatized. But somehow in Pakistan, it's a little different here. Why different? Because here most of the time, the entities which are profit-making, they are privatized in order to facilitate someone who is your relative or your close friend. That is the difference between Pakistan and the other countries. Like I can give you an example of MCB Bank. MCB Bank, it was a profit-making entity, it was privatized. And the loss-making entities, you know, the Pakistan Railway, the PIA, they are still in the public sector. They are not privatized. So what is the change? What is the impact of this change from public to private sector? A change in the objectives of the organization. How this change occurs? When you go into the private sector, the main objective is the profit making. The main objective is the growth. While on the other side, if you stay in the public sector, the profit making is not one of the objectives of a public sector enterprise. So there is a complete 180-degree shift of the objective. Then there becomes freedom to introduce new products, new services, and there is a freedom to diversify as well. So when you move on to the private sector, there becomes the freedom. And there are opportunities. There are opportunities to restructure your organization, to restructure your workforce, to restructure even your working practices, which is not available in the public sector enterprises where they don't accept the change. But in the private sector, you have to live with the change. You have to move with the change. So we have the opportunities, as we said, opportunities to restructure, opportunities to re-emphasize on the workforce, opportunities to develop your workforce when you move into the private sector. But some businesses are natural monopolies, and it is better to control such monopolies in the public sector. What I said, it is better to control. Not always, not always. Like some public health enterprises, they are better to control, to be controlled by the public sector. In Pakistan, like you can see WAPDA, that is a national monopoly that is being controlled by the public sector. But I am of the view that if the WAPDA is privatized, there would be a lot better change in the whole structure of the WAPDA. But however, it is still running. You can see that PTCL, when it was privatized, there is a lot change in their working structure, in their working. And there is an increased competition with the cellular companies. And that's why they are, with every passing day, they are trying to improve their services. They move on. Yes, privatization can be expensive. How expensive? Because privatization leads to redundancies, and you have to pay those redundant people. In the public sector, on one seat, you are having 2 or 3 or more people working for that, because you are having many people which are not required. But in the private sector, when you go for rationalization, there are redundancies. And when there are redundancies, there is a cost. And that's why privatization becomes an expensive venture. And it is also likely that a private sector business will continue as a loss-making service to community. Why? Because of different reasons. Because of the different reasons. One of the reasons can be tax saving, or just to showing that it's still a loss-making company and there is no major change. Okay. Now, our discussion of this topic has ended now. But yesterday, some of you has demanded that we have to discuss the pattern of the paper 3. So today we have devoted some time, 10 to 15 minutes, for the discussion of the paper 3. As I hope you must be aware that paper 3 is a case study. It's a case study based paper, and it's a specialized paper of 3 hours. Quite different from your previous paper 1, paper 2. 3 hours paper having a complete case study with all your tables, data, and charts and things like that in the case study. And the weightage of this paper 3 is 50%. 30% weightage is for your paper 2 and 20% weightage is for your paper 1. So coming back to paper 3, it's a 3-hour paper of case analysis. And here, after the case, you have to attempt 6 questions in all. There are 2 sections, section 1, section 2. In the section 1, you have 5 questions without any choice. You have to answer all the 5 questions in the section 1. And in the section 2, you have to answer only 1 question from a choice. Means there are mostly 2 questions, and among the 2 questions, you have to
बाकी सारी क्लासेस में तो नहीं सुना था इकोनॉमिक्स की क्लास लिया होगा तो कैमरा चल रहा होता मौलवी साहब को बहुत ही तो मैंने गाड़ी की
Okay, there is some problem really in the internet connectivity. Be with us, bear with us. Okay, as I was saying that in the section 2, you have most of the time 2 questions, and from the 2 questions, you have to attempt only 1 question. And this question is of 20 marks. Most of the time, these 2 questions in the section 2, they come from your unit number 6, which is strategic management. And all the other 5 questions in the section 1, they cover your whole topics of your A2. And because we have to deal with the case study, and this case study must be the one that is covering all your course, all your topics, which you are going to cover in this class, that is naturally whenever you are required to attempt the paper or you are going to practice the paper, you have to complete your course first. That is very important. But we'll try with the passage of time that as we finish up with the topics, we'll try to do a little case studies for your practice as well, for your awareness, how to attempt the case studies, how to do with such type of case studies. Now, as we are now aware that these are the case studies which we have to deal with. So what is a case study? First of all, case study. What is case study? Cases, these provide the would-be managers. Would-be managers means you people, you are going to become future managers. So these cases provide the would-be managers with a valuable way to practice. What to practice? The actual problems which occur in actual companies in the world. From there, these case studies were developed and are presented to us in order to be acquainted with the happenings, with the problems in the world, and try to attempt those problems, try to solve those problems, try to suggest the solution to the problems as were actual happened, right? So the essence of students' role here in the case study analysis is to diagnose and size up the situation, which is described in the case, and then to recommend the appropriate action steps. So it is very important in the case study. This is all required from a student perspective, that they can understand the case, they can size up the situation, they can diagnose the problem, and they can recommend the appropriate action steps which are to be taken. So these cases help on job, we substitute, these are the substitute for the on job experience. We are not doing actual work anywhere, but what we are doing in the case study, we are actually learning the experience of the people which were there. So this gives you a broader exposure to a variety of industries. You are aware organization, strategic problems, and they force you to assume a managerial role. You become a manager, you start thinking over and over again, you size up the situation, you tackle the problem. This is all required. So it provides a test of how to apply the different tools and techniques which you learn over here over the course of your study. And for those tools and techniques are being utilized for the analysis of your case, right? They help you to ask, to come up with pragmatic managerial action plans to deal with the issues at hand. So this all help you, the case studies. So case analysis is a powerful way to accomplish 5 things. So remember 5 things. Number 1, increase your understanding of what managers should and should not do in guiding a business to success. This is the first requirement. Second is, it builds your skills in sizing up a company's resources, strengths, weaknesses, and conducting the strategic analysis in a variety of industries and comparative situation. So you come up with different situations, you come up with different industries, you try to solve their problems, you try to implement the tools and techniques which you have learned over the passage of time. Number 3, the objective of this means case analysis. Number 3 is get valuable practice in identifying the issues that need to be addressed and evaluating those issues, evaluating the alternatives, and formulating the workable plans. So as I am saying that you have to formulate workable plans. So it means that the plans must not be the same. Any student can have any plan, but that must be a workable plan. So there is no absolute plan in this business study or in the case analysis, but you must have the sound arguments behind that workable plan. Then that is successful. That is applicable. And number 4, it also enhances your sense of business judgment. As you indulge into it, as you move into it, your business sense, your business judgment increases. And you do not rely on the bag of the book answers. Like in mathematics, when you solve a question, you have an answer and then you tally that answer with the bag of the book answer. And if it's the same, then you say that my question is correct. But in business, there is no absolute truth. There is no back to the book answer. You have to come up with your own workable plan with sound arguments. If your arguments are correct, you are okay. You are okay with it. And on the number 5 is these cases guide you in depth exposure to different industries and companies, thereby acquiring something close to actual business experience. So these are the case studies which help you to inculcate a business sense, a business judgment into you, so that you can uh, try to figure out the situation, try to figure out the problems, the issues that actually occurred somewhere in the world, somewhere in the industry, somewhere in the organization, and they solve that problem by their knowledge. Here we again sitting here or sitting in the classroom, we study that problem and make our own workable plans. Those plans might be entirely different from the plans which they come up with, but these must be workable and there must be sound arguments behind that plan. So you must remember that in the business world, answers don't come in conclusive black and white. There are nearly always several feasible courses of action and approaches, and each of may work quite satisfactorily. But again, as I said earlier, you have to have sound arguments behind those. So a very important thing for the case analysis is, someone said, it was a business guru, Rudyard Kipling. He said, I keep 6 honest serving men. They taught me all I know. And what are those? Their names are what and why, and when, how, where, and who. So these 6 questions you have to implement in your case analysis. When you are into these, when you ask how, when you ask why, when you ask who did this, where this came from, and how to tackle with such things, naturally you are into your critical thinking, you are into the solution of those case studies, and what else is required. This is all which is required from your case analysis. You have to build up the critical analysis techniques, as I said, and try to ask questions from yourself, and these questions will help up in solving the case study, right? So here I hope you must be now aware of how these case studies help you, what are the case studies, how to tackle the case studies, and your paper pattern as well. Will with the course of time, when we move into more and more like coursework, then we also try to solve case studies, first smaller case studies, then we move on to the bigger case studies as well. So I hope this has clarified all the concerns of you people. If further you have any questions or queries, we are here to satisfy you. Now we end up this session, and then we are into question answer session. Thank you very much.